Hello, welcome to Alyssa Jean's Reviews and Happy New Year. This is my annual top 10 video. This time I will be counting down my top 10 favorite shows of 2024. And I do have a lot of stuff that I usually do before I actually get into the top 10. So let me dive into it with a summary of the shows that I watched in 2024. I watched 19 total shows in 2024, which is about my average. Last year I did 20. Typically it is somewhere between like 17 and 20 shows a year. Except for 2022, for some reason I did 32 shows. I don't even know how I had time to watch all those shows. It's not like COVID was still much of a thing. So I don't know, 2022 is an outlier. Usually it is somewhere between 17 and 20 shows, and this year it was 19 shows. Something a little different this year is I have a couple of rom-coms in the mix, so mixing up my genres a little bit. If you know my channel, you know it's usually fantasy, sci-fi, genre fiction, a lot of those franchises, Star Trek, Star Wars, MCU, that sort of thing, and I still have all of that, but mixing in a couple rom-coms. I don't know. I have to admit that I've been on hormones for 4 years, and since that happens, I do kind of like rom-coms and musicals more. I know that sounds like I'm stereotyping, but I don't know what to tell you. That is really the truth. I don't know what else to tell you. There are no musicals, musical TV shows in my top 19. Although I did see the movie Wicked and I liked it. But anyways, there's a couple of rom-coms, and I think I still don't like a lot of rom-coms because of the repetitive tropes, and like it can kind of fall into some of the same old stuff. But the rom-coms that I have on this list are better rom-coms. They're good rom-coms. One is in my top 10, one falls short of my top 10, but the one that falls short I've already talked about in my awards video. That is Heartstopper Season 3. And it's a shame I didn't watch Heartstopper Season 1 and 2 when they originally aired, because I would have put those in my top 10. But Season 3, although I still like it, falls a bit short of my top 10. And I will, in just a few moments, show you my entire top 19. I'll give you 19 through 11. Just scroll across the screen. But before I get to that, I just want to talk briefly about some shows that you will not see in this video. Starting with The Boys Season 4. I talked about this last year when Gen V came out, that I am done with The Boys franchise, one of the most overrated shows of all time, and that's all I need to say about that. Along the same lines, though, Umbrella Academy Season 4 is another show I didn't watch, even though I had watched the previous 3 seasons, and I actually did kind of enjoy Season 3. Umbrella Academy always comes out the same year as The Boys, and I kind of lump those two shows together because they're both about like dark superheroes or whatever. I watched the first episode of Season 4 of the Umbrella Academy, but they do this time jump for no reason whatsoever, and that kind of took me out of the story, and I just didn't find myself interested in it. And then I flew back to the East Coast right after I watched episode 1 and was busy doing things over there, and then came back and I was like, do I want to watch episode 2? Not really. I mean, it's not even that great of a show to begin with. So I did not watch Umbrella Academy Season 4, even though I'd watched previous seasons. Another show that I did not watch, although I did try to watch, like I tried to watch Umbrella Academy. There's another show I tried to watch. Don't hate me. I'm sorry. Dune Prophecy. I tried. I have been trying with this franchise since I was a kid, and my parents took me to see the David Lynch film. My parents were huge fans of the books. They tried to get me to read the book when I was old enough. I've never been able to be captured by this franchise. I'm sorry. I don't know. It's some obligation where I feel like I have to like this franchise, so I kept trying. I made it through part way through the first episode, fell asleep, came back, tried again, fell asleep, came back, tried again, and was just didn't fall asleep, but was just so bored I turned it off. It was so boring. I was not captivated by any of the characters, by the world. I've just never been captivated by this world. I just never have been. And I tried really hard. And I was like, why am I trying so hard to force myself to sit through something that is boring as fuck and I don't enjoy just because I'm supposed to watch Dune? So sorry, Dune fans. I gave up before the first episode was over. I tried 3 times. I tried to force myself, but I can't do it. I can't do it. So Dune Prophecy, not on this list anywhere. And the last show that I want to mention that isn't on this list is Star Wars Skeleton Crew, and that is not because it sucked or I didn't watch it. I did watch it. It just isn't finished yet. It will finish its run on January 14th of 2025. Therefore, it cannot qualify for my list in 2024. It must wait until 2025. And it's funny because I keep a running list of the shows that are in my top 10 as I watch them. So whatever the first show is that I watch every year is #1 for a short period of time. So Skeleton Crew will be my #1 show of 2025 until I watch something else that I rank higher than it, which probably won't take that long if we're being honest. But anyways, no Skeleton Crew because it won't be finished until January 2025. Anyways, let me go ahead now and run my 19 through 11 up the screen for you. I think it goes this way. And in parentheses will be my rating out of 10 for each episode. So let me go ahead and do that. All right, there you have it, my 19 through 11 with the rating out of 10 in parentheses. Now, I do want to go through a couple of honorable mentions. As I said, it takes me a while to get to the top 10, but I will get there, I promise. Um, and it's not necessarily my number 12 and my number 11 on the list you just saw, although my number 11 I will talk about. But the other one I want to talk about is my number 14. And it's just because I've never talked about it on this channel before, nor on my Facebook page, so this is my chance to talk about it. So my first honorable mention is Outer Range Season 2. Season 1 came out in 2022, but I had never heard of it. I came across an article that said that if you were a fan of the show Dark from Netflix, that you might be interested in Outer Range. And I love Dark, so I figured I'd give it a shot. Now, Dark is not only my favorite time travel show of all time, it is one of my favorite shows, period. So I never had any delusions that Outer Range would be even as remotely as good as Dark for me because that's just such a high bar. Especially it being in this Western setting, modern day cowboys in Wyoming or whatever. Like, that's just not a setting that's that interesting to me. So I knew it wouldn't be as good as Dark. But I was hoping it would still be pretty good. So I binged the first season and I thought it was barely average. Like I was hoping it would be better than that. Season 2 was a step up, and it does end up with a 7.5 rating out of 10, so it's not terrible at all. I probably would have given season 1 more like a 6. Season 2 was definitely an improvement, but it was a frustrating show to watch because they don't do enough to answer the mysteries. They do like these weird lost like things, weird things that happen, and they don't resolve enough of them. And that is not compensated for enough by strong character stories the way that Lost did. And the character stories do get stronger in season 2 than they were in season 1, but just not enough. Um, and they also mess with the time travel logic. And if you know my channel, you know like I'm very stickler about time travel logic because they have two different types of time travel logic that they appear to be using. But I do think that there's supposed to be an explanation for that, like a reason why there's two different types, which Dark also did, and Dark pulled it off. So I do think that there was a reason for it, but we never actually get that, and we never will because the show was canceled. So, which is fine. Um, but I did just want to kind of mention it here since I've never mentioned it on my channel before. Out of Range Season 2 gets a 7.5 and lands in my top 15 as an honorable mention. My next honorable mention is House of the Dragon Season 2. I did talk about this in my awards video because it got the award for the most disappointing show of the year. And I said in that video that it is on the cusp of being in my top 10 or not being in my top 10. And it did just barely miss my top 10. It ends up at number 11. I did give it an 8 out of 10 rating, which is also what number 10 and number 9 in my top 10 also got. But I rank it last amongst my 8 out of 10 rating shows that I watched, and it falls just outside of my top 10. And this is disappointing because season 1 was my number 1 show of 2022, and it got a 10 out of 10 rating. And knowing what the story was, having read the source material, I really thought season 2 was going to be even better. And it started off really strong, but there's the point in the book that I thought they should have ended the season with, and they could have if they wanted to, but they kind of dragged out. Damon is tripping on acid for way too long. Corlys is standing by his boat for way too long, and they drag things out instead of getting to the point of the story that they should have got to, in my opinion. And what they leave us with is no ending at all. It was a great penultimate episode that they ended the season with. We never actually got a finale, a proper finale. And if they had ended the season where I thought they should have ended it, and they had done a really good job of it, there's a good chance this also would have been my number 1 show of 2024 and also gotten a 10 out of 10. But since they really dropped the ball at the end of the season, still a good show, still 8 out of 10, but it does fall a little short of my top 10 at number 11. All right, now after all that, I promise you we're almost there. Just another quick brief intro of my top 10. I did want to say that I will be doing my ratings again in the top 10. I will be telling you which rating out of 10 each show got. And there's a little bit of a downgrade in 2024 from the previous 2 years. A streak was broken. I had 2 years in a row where I had no shows in my top 10 under a rating of 8.5. 8.5 was the lowest rating in my top 10. This year, as I just alluded to a moment ago, number 10 and number 9 are 8s out of 10, so not quite as strong. But then I have numbers 8 and 7 will be a 8.5 out of 10, and then still pretty strong showing for the 9s out of 10s. I got 6 up through 2 are 9 out of 10, and my number 1 will be a 10 out of 10, which has been par for the course. Every year I think only my number 1 gets a 10 out of 10. I've been doing about 1 10 out of 10 per year and a lot of 9s. So that part is normal. Anyways, let's go ahead now and jump into my top 10. Okay, kicking off my top 10 shows of the year of 2024 with my number 10, Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power, Season 2. Now, if you had told me in 2022 that I would have Lord of the Rings, Season 2 ranked higher than House of the Dragon, Season 2, I would have thought you were insane because for the first seasons that each came out in 2022, House of the Dragon was vastly superior. It wasn't even close. But House of the Dragon takes a bit of a dip, and Lord of the Rings gets a lot better. Now, it still has some room for improvement. It does still land with an 8 out of 10 rating, so it could even get better in Season 3, and hopefully it will. But what I really loved about Season 2 that I felt was lacking in season 1 a bit was the character stories, particularly what they did with Sauron. I thought was fantastic. I love how they portrayed him as being so manipulative. It was really fun to watch. It's cool to see Sauron portrayed on screen as something other than a big giant eye. So I really enjoyed that. A lot of the storylines were really fantastic. Some storylines not as much. There are some characters that probably shouldn't have been there, really. And then that Numenor storyline is still kind of crappy for me. But big improvement in season 2. Hopefully it gets better in season 3. And Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power lands in my top 10. At number 9, Nobody Wants This, Season 1. Now this is the rom-com I referred to earlier that makes it into my top 10. And it gets an 8 out of 10 rating from me. It was really a challenge to figure out how to place this in relation to Lord of the Rings and House of the Dragon, because all 3 of them got 8s out of 10. But those 2 are high fantasies and this one's a rom-com, so it felt like an apples and oranges type situation. But I thought about why each show got an 8 out of 10 as opposed to a 9 or a 10 out of 10. And in the case of Lord of the Rings and House of the Dragon, it definitely has to do primarily with the deficiencies of the show. Whereas here, honestly, it's probably mostly a genre penalty. So there's not as much deficiencies though. So it made sense to me to rank this higher than those other 2 shows, and that's where it comes in. At number 9, I just love this show. It was really adorable, and Adam Brody is just so freaking cute. It's so cute. And it is a trope that we've seen many times in rom-coms, which I don't think there's a lot of new tropes you're ever going to see in a rom-com, which is probably why I wasn't into the genre for the longest time. It's 2 people who fall in love who come from different backgrounds, specifically religious backgrounds. Specifically, the Jewish religion is used, which I feel like I've seen that before, but it's just done so well that I really enjoyed it. And mainly it's done well because of the chemistry between the 2 main actors. That is so important for me in a rom-com, any kind of romance really, but in this case it's romantic comedy romantic chemistry as well as comedic chemistry that is just on point. And another thing this show does well, I think this is an underrated aspect of rom-coms, is you need a good supporting character for comedy. Like, I feel like a lot of rom-coms that I've seen have unfunny supporting characters that are trying to be funny, but I just don't find them to be funny. I can't think of any examples, but I feel like I've seen that a bunch. Whereas this has really good supporting characters who are really funny, and just the comedy overall is really good. Just chemistry between all the characters, I think it just pops off the screen. This just works really well. So Nobody Wants This is my number 9 show. Believe it or not, a rom-com is my number 9 show in 2024. Okay, back to the typical sci-fi genre. Let's get into my number 8, which is Star Trek Prodigy Season 2, which begins my run of 2 shows that have an 8.5 out of 10 rating from me. And so I did reviews on Prodigy, so you should check that out on my channel if you haven't already. For me, this was a huge improvement over Season 1, and that has a lot to do with the fact that I didn't like Season 1 nearly as much as other people seem to, and I thought that the storytelling here was way better. And they did do some good character stuff in Season 1, which I think gets even better in Season 2. Now, there is 20 episodes, so some of them are going to be duds. That's just the way of the world, but I think that the episodes that were good, to me, were really, really good. Way better than anything in Season 1, in my opinion. We get, of course, a classic legacy character. I'll just say it because you should have seen this. If you haven't, spoilers ahead. Wesley Crusher! Oh my god! And the way that they used him was just magnificent. perfect. So much better than his appearance in Picard Season 2, which was... I don't even need to get into that. But I'm talking about a good show here. Prodigy Season 2 surprised me with how good it is, because I had such low expectations coming into it. I really wish we would get a Season 3. It kind of seems like we probably won't. But regardless, Prodigy Season 2 does come in at number 8 with an 8.5 out of 10 rating. Coming in at number 7, another Star Trek show with an 8.5 out of 10 rating. This time it was easy to pick which one should be ranked higher, even though they both have the same rating, and that's because Lower Decks is just a better show than Prodigy. With all due respect, I almost said disrespect, but all due respect to YouTuber Steve Shives, who says that Prodigy is by far the best animated series. Please. Lower Decks is by far the greatest animated series Star Trek has ever done, and one of the best animated series ever. Not even close. End of conversation. However, it does have a bit of a drop-off in Season 5, which unfortunately was its final season. This is, I believe, the first time the Lower Decks fails to crack my top 5, at least over the last couple years anyway, because normally it is up there, and normally it does have a 9 out of 10 rating, but this year a half a point lower, and that has everything to do with neglecting the characters, particularly Rutherford, also having 2 episodes in a row toward the end of the season where we don't get our main characters at all. We get alternate versions of a couple of them in one of those episodes, but we don't get our characters at all, and it was really unfortunate that this ended up being the final season. I know they didn't plan for that, but it was really unfortunate. I think they should have done up our characters more, regardless of whether they knew it was the final season. However, it's still an 8.5 out of 10. It's still my number 7 because it's freaking Lower Decks. Great character stories in this season. We get a lot of Mariner, but we also get a couple of good Tendi stories, and those last, I think 3 out of the last 4 were just fantastic. That Upper Decks episode is fine, but the other 3 of the last 4, not just because of the cameos, but because of the chemistry between the characters and the comedy. I feel like I just said this for Nobody Wants This, but this is a totally different kind of show. It all works really well. Maybe not as good as the previous 2 seasons, but still, it is number 7 for 2024. Coming in at number 6 for 2024 is Fallout Season 1, the first of a string of shows that get a 9 out of 10 rating. I don't know if you've noticed, the music changes each time the rating changes. It's the lowest ranked of my 9 out of 10 ratings, but one of them has to be, and I still loved it. So I will say the same thing I said for The Last of Us last year, which is that I am not a gamer. I know nothing about video games. Fallout I had heard of, but knew nothing about it, and still don't. Unlike The Last of Us, where I watched YouTube videos that kind of explain the difference between the video game and the show, I didn't do that for Fallout, so no idea, don't care. I'm just looking at this show as a show that stands on its own, and I really enjoyed it. First of all, the concept was really interesting to me, this alternate apocalyptic future and the vaults and all of that stuff. And it was predictable that things probably weren't as they seem, but that didn't make it any less interesting for me. I didn't know exactly what was really going on or anything like that. I knew it was probably not what our main character thought it was. I knew we had an unreliable narrator, but I thought that was all done extremely well. I thought the character development, particularly for our 3 main characters, the ones that you see on this thumbnail here, I thought was all really well done, really well acted. And I watched this not when it originally streamed, but I watched it a couple months later. So when I ended up watching it, it was right after I watched House of the Dragon end. And it was like a palate cleanser to watch a show that actually has a good ending. In a serialized show like this, where you're going to have a continuation of the story, you still need to have an ending to a season like it's a chapter in a book. Like, it has to have its own ending. And this one did a really good job of that, having a good character ending. So our main character has changed, has gone through a lot, and is a different person than she was at the start of it. And that's the sign of a good ending and a good season. So really enjoyed Fallout despite not knowing the video game at all, and I can't wait for Season 2. Moving into my number 5, Squid Game Season 2. So this is the show that comes in at the very, very end of the year and knocks House of the Dragon right on out of my top 10. This, like House of the Dragon, was number 1 in a previous year. So Squid Game Season 1 was my number 1 show of 2021 with a 10 out of 10 rating. And like House of the Dragon, there's a bit of a fall off, but not as much, not nearly as much, honestly, of a fall off between seasons. And to be fair, Season 1 of Squid Game is one of my favorite seasons of all time. I think it's a masterpiece, personally. I know it's like trendy to say that it's overrated now, but no, it isn't. It's a masterpiece, and I will stick by that. So Season 2 had a lot to live up to, and it never was going to. I never really expected it to be the same as Season 1. So given that, I thought this did a really great job. I got a little worried when I saw the trailer and he's back in the game again. I'm like, oh no, are they just gonna copy and paste the plot from Season 1? I hate it when sequels do that, where they just do the same thing over again in a slightly different way. That's not at all what they did here. There was much more of a focus on Jin Ho's his trauma that he got from Season 1 and his absolute determination, one might even say obsession, with taking down and ending the Squid Game, and a little less of a focus on the games themselves, although that is certainly still a part of it. And I really like the themes here. I almost think they do a better job with the themes than they do in Season 1. Just the class disparity, and what we see here is a character who is trying to take down a system which he underestimates just how entrenched the system is and how good the system is at manipulating people and getting people to go along with the system even though it is against their own interest. I'm sorry, but the voting scenes, I know this was made in Korea, so this might not have been intentional, but really seemed like MAGA voting to me. Seemed like a kind of a comment on people who vote against their own interests because the people in power make them believe that it is in their interest to vote a certain way, and in this case, to vote for their own deaths, potentially, which is not too far off of real life. I thought this was a really good parallel for real life. Now, I want to address the fact that this does end in a cliffhanger. I'm not bothered by this, as I know that other people are bothered by it. I saw it coming as soon as I started watching episode 7, because I saw that it was definitely the last episode, and I was like, they're not gonna wrap this up. There's no way they're wrapping this up. There's too many loose threads, so I kind of expected it, and I still think it was a good ending for the character. It was a good place to stop the story. Now, perhaps it would have been better if they had called this Season 2 Part 1 and then call the next installment, which we are getting in 2025. Thankfully, we don't have to wait another 3 years. Maybe call that Season 2 Part 2. Maybe that would have made people feel better. Personally, I don't care. But so Season 3, I'm psyched that it's coming out next year, so we don't have to wait too long to see the conclusion of this cliffhanger. I thought it was a great season, even if it's not to the level of Season 1. It makes it at number 5 in my top 10. Coming in at number 4, X-Men 97 Season 1 with a 9 out of 10 rating. So just before I watched this, I binge the previous X-Men cartoon because I never actually saw it before because it came on when I was in college and I was beyond cartoons at that point, but I thought I should brush up on the previous X-Men series, and I ended up skipping a lot of the filler episodes. And the thing about X-Men 97 is there are no filler episodes. I would say that episode 4 that's kind of split into two different storylines, I think the second, or maybe it was the first storyline, is filler, but then everything else is moving forward the greater story arc of the serialized story. And I'm sorry, but X-Men 97 blows the original X-Men cartoon out of the water because this is Kevin Feige. This is more sophisticated. This is more complicated and darker. It reminded me a lot of the original X-Men comics, which, to be fair, I have not read since the early 90s, but I remember this feeling of darkness. And in fact, this season does cover some of the storylines that I remember from the comic books in the early 90s. So really, they did a great job at them, and just, God, I forget how dark the X-Men can be. And then we get that episode 5, which some people have likened it to the Red Wedding. I don't know if I would go quite that far, but it was pretty fantastic and also pretty gut-wrenching and pretty dark. And I think the season kind of continues from there. And it does really hit on a lot of the same themes all the X-Men projects have done, including the films, especially the parallels between real life with how humans treat mutants and mutants treat humans and all of that. For me, I just can't help but see a lot of LGBTQ parallels. I think, though, you could probably make parallels to a lot of oppressed groups. But I think that this actually does a better job at that than the films ever did. I think it's just a sophisticated show for a freaking cartoon, and absolutely fantastic. Loved it. Hope that we do get another season of this show. Now we move to my number 3, which is The Penguin, Season 1. And now I have already discussed the show in great detail on my awards video. This got the award for the most pleasant surprise of 2024 because I was not expecting that I would like it. It's a Batman show, and I am totally Batmaned out. I just could live the rest of my life, I felt like, without ever seeing anything else Batman related ever again. And it's also a mafia show, which is not a genre that I'm that into. But then I did eventually stream it a couple months after it originally came on, and I freaking loved it. It was amazing. And I would go so far to say that as much as I like the Penguin character and as much as I liked Colin Farrell, I think that the woman who did Sophia Falcone, later Sophia Gigante, was the show stealer. She really made this show for me. And I just found it so fascinating that all of the characters are anti-heroes. They're all really unlikable, and yet you can feel some empathy for each of them at certain points in the season, and then they take that empathy away because they show that they're really actually terrible human beings. But I thought everything about the show, the acting, directing, the writing, was far better than I ever expected it to be. And with a 9 out of 10 rating, it ends up all the way up in my number 3, something I would have never ever predicted would happen. So The Penguin, Season 1, number 3 of 2024. Now we get to my number 2, which is Star Trek Discovery, Season 5. Yes, you heard me! Star Trek Discovery is my number 2. I don't give a shit what anyone says. I get tired of all the trash talk and all the hating that Discovery has gotten over the years, and some of it is deserved. I've never thought it was the perfect show. I have had a lot of issues with the show myself. I think that it honestly took until season 5 for it to finally get it right, and there's still people who don't think season 5 was all that amazing. I did. I think it's the best that the show has ever done, and it's a shame that it doesn't have more seasons to tell more story. And I did not even think that I would like this season going into it either, because we were going to do this Indiana Jones adventure thing that didn't sound that interesting to me. But it's what they do with the different characters and the different stories that they tell, and the way that they bring in a legacy Trek alien race that had not been explored before very much, which is the Breen, and they just bring them back and show what they look like without their masks on and get into their culture. Why couldn't they have done this earlier? In fact, I did a whole video about how Discovery should have been written and said that the Breen should have been introduced from the beginning. But regardless, I am so happy they finally got it right. And that episode 4 where Michael Burnham confronts her previous self, I think is my favorite episode of the series, or at least my second favorite episode of the series. So Star Trek Discovery Season 5, it goes out in a bang, and I don't give a crap what anyone else says. Oh, Discovery this, Discovery that. This was fantastic, and yes, that's right, you heard me, it's my number 2 show of 2024, and I stand by that with a passion. And now we get to my number 1 show of the year. And here it is, my number 1 show of the year, Agatha All Along Season 1. And 2024 has just been full of surprises, from House of Dragon disappointing me, from Lord of the Rings being better than I thought, from me watching these rom-coms and really enjoying them, to the Penguin just blowing my mind when I thought that I would hate it. But Agatha All Along, though it did not win the Pleasant Surprise of the Year award, it was close. And I think it didn't get that award because I probably had higher expectations for it than I had for the Penguin. But it just blew my mind, just everything about it. I did a video where I kind of talked about the witchy elements of the show and the kind of the femininity that is involved in that, and how I view it differently now since transitioning than I would have before, and how that was all very important for me. But even putting that all aside, I think the twists that they do in the story are really fantastic, and it's just really great storytelling. And I have not gone back and watched it again, but I would like to, because I am sure that you would see this from a different perspective after you know what's really going on. It did in a lot of ways remind me of its predecessor, which is WandaVision, but I think it outdoes WandaVision, and mainly because it ends it well. It doesn't have to do the big Marvel battle in the finale. It does do kind of a battle like that in the penultimate episode, and then settles down and really digs into the character stuff in the finale, which was a great way to end it. And Joe Locke, absolutely fantastic. It was because of this show that I then went back and watched him in Heartstopper, which I also loved, even if season 3 doesn't make my top 10 quite. But oh my god, I just cannot believe how much I just adored this show. It is, by the way, if you haven't figured it out, because I did say this earlier, it is a 10 out of 10 rating, the only one that I gave this year. And look at the MCU go. This is the second consecutive year where I named my number 1 show 10 out of 10 rating, an MCU show. Last year it was Loki season 2. This year it is Agatha All Along season 1. I loved this show so much. Best show of the year. And there you have it, my top 10 shows of 2024. I will see you again in 2025. Well, we'll do this all over again at the end of the year. I'll see you before that too, but not too often. As you may know, I don't do a lot on my channel anymore, but I'll do a few things here and there. And also, you should definitely like me on Facebook because I post reviews on there sometimes as well. Anyway, Happy New Year, everyone. See you next time. Goodbye.